Here we have the house and the car collection of the former president of El Salvador. His name is Mauricio Funes. And as you can see, this car collection looks like something out of a James Bond Goldfinger movie. But this was his private collection, and this was all done with Salvadorian taxpayer dollar. It was corruption under his presidency, money that he used for his own personal gains. And this has been confiscated now under the President Bukele presidency because he's dealing with corruption of the past administrations. Look at this house. The house is, we're talking about well over $1 million. And that car collection is something, like I said, those are restored antique cars. This is like something out of a movie, a Hollywood movie. But this is what happened before. And the politicians were, at this time, before the time of President Bukele, they were negotiating with the gangs, the MS-13 and 18th Street Gang. Here we have members of the gangs that are negotiating, like both the MS-13 and the 18th Street Gang. They were negotiating with each other. What they did was they agreed not to kill each other, but they grew in other aspects like extortion, kidnappings, and so on. What they agreed upon was not to kill each other, the MS-13 and the 18th Street Gangs, but they grew in other aspects. But these negotiations happened with politicians involved. The politicians from both parties were trying to negotiate votes from the gangs, and so they promised the gangs property. They promised them farms, in the sense of trying to teach them how to, agriculture, so to speak, and other, like a different way of life, so to speak. But they also gave them weapons, high caliber weapons, M16s and so on, and even taught them how to shoot them. So this was the corruption that was happening, but it was done for votes. All this corruption has now ended with the presidency of Bukele.
We are honored to be joined right now by the president of El Salvador, President Bukele. Mr. President, thanks so much for coming on. So it sounds to me like you reduced the murder rate in El Salvador in a pretty straightforward way. I wonder why other heads of state aren't calling you for advice on how to do it in their countries.
Thank you, Tucker, for having me, and I'm glad to be here. Well, I don't know. Every country, I think, has their own problems. I would guess that probably our approach, that is very, very popular with the people, has a problem. And the problem is that it has common sense.
Now let's look at what some of these critics have to say. Now here we have Jorge Ramos from Univision, news reporter, reporting on the human rights violations of the gangs under the presidency of Bukele. And they're talking to a Human Rights Watch personnel, and they're talking about all the human rights abuses that they're worried about in regards to the gangs. But the question is, where were the human rights people before? Like, how come they never appeared when the gangs were running wild under the previous administrations? By the way, in order to be a member of the MS-13 or the 18th Street Gang, you have to execute somebody. In other words, you have to kill somebody. That's how you get into the gang. You have to murder somebody. And in many cases, it was a child. That's how come you'd have many cases of innocent children that were executed. And you say, why? Well, it had to do with a gang member being initiated. But Human Rights Watch, for whatever reason, never popped up in El Salvador during this time. But now they're all of a sudden concerned over the human rights abuses of these criminals, these serial killers.
And
yes,
I say it's a problem because usually the new wave of governance is taking away common sense and started doing things the other way around, the way that, of course, you shouldn't do them.
So when it seems like when you became president in 2019, you focused very specifically on crime, gangs, murder. Is that correct? And why did you do that? Why that issue?
Well, not only on crime, of course, we focus on other issues: education, health, public works, investment, tourism, infrastructure, etc. But of course, crime is the most important thing. I mean, you might enjoy a road or a beach, but that's if you're alive. So of course,
Yes.
the lives of the people are the most important thing. So that's why we focus on crime more. But of course, we did focus on all the other issues as well.